Welcome to Branding the Experience. We discuss ways how we can create environments where employees actually want to come to work and customers want to keep coming back. Brought to you by Bator Training and Consulting and Break Ice Marketing.
I'm your host for Branding the Experience, Ken Bator, and I am really pleased to have spent some time with you these last few months. Was really excited and still am excited about relaunching Branding the Experience after a long hiatus. We're gonna close this season 11 up for the holidays. So before I get into my subject matter, I want to wish each and every one of you a happy Thanksgiving, a great holiday season, Christmas, Kwanzaa, Hanukkah, whatever it is you celebrate. I hope you have a terrific couple of months here. Happy New Year starting in 2026. And we'll be back with you sometime in the first quarter of next year. And especially thank Heather Dowell from Break Ice Marketing joining me on a number of these episodes and really having some insightful conversations about branding, also about culture and strategy. But I really appreciate her unique marketing expertise and always love the intelligent discussions on what marketing and branding needs to be today, and I look forward to doing more episodes with her in 2026. In the meantime, as I close up this season, I want to talk about brand culture strategy in one of the hot topics in the news lately. Maybe it was hot to me because I actually use YouTube TV. And many don't, at least not yet. They're one of the largest providers of cable TV, not cable TV, but television in general, streaming television to a lot of people. I think it's about 10 million households. And some of you may be familiar with the fight that Disney had with YouTube and their parent company Google over the rights to show their channels: ESPN, ABC, ESPN2, Freeform, FX, a few others. And that fight went on for a couple of weeks, during which, a lot of consumers, including myself, were without a number of channels. Me being a sports fan, that obviously hurt me. I like my ESPN. I like my ESPN2. Was still able to watch Monday Night Football on ABC, but lost out on a lot of college football. So first, I want to talk about it from a brand culture strategy standpoint, and let's work backwards from the strategy standpoint. I found this fight fascinating, not as a consumer, but as a business consultant, because both entities, Google and Disney, have their strategies. Disney, in particular, which is the smaller player of the two. In fact, I think that Google is like, I would have to look at the numbers, but 10, 12 times the size of what Disney is. But Disney, has a strategy of being profitable in the streaming area. In fact, I'd have to look at the numbers again, but I believe the one piece that is very profitable are their theme parks, but they're in the red when it comes to Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, Hulu, and their channels in general. And they're trying to get profitable there. I think Bob Iger is taking a playbook out of Jack Welch back in the day of GE, that every piece of the business needs to be profitable. So they're pushing really hard to make sure that their television portion of their business is profitable. And I will tell you that going back even decades to the days of when I was in graduate school, there was kind of a thought of, from a culture standpoint, that from a brand standpoint first, is Disney seems very warm and fluffy and fun and caring with the Mickey Mouse and the Goofy and all that. But when it comes to corporate dealings, whether it's legally or talking about partnerships, they're actually pretty prickly, that they actually play hardball and play hardball really hard and really well. And Bob Iger was certainly part of that back in the day, and he's back. And I think they've tried to do that, and they've done that successfully with some other entities, probably Comcast and Spectrum and Dish TV and some other entities where they were able to get their price, get their way. But sometimes you mess with somebody you just shouldn't mess with. And Google, being much bigger than Disney, basically said, you know what? We're not playing your game. Yeah, they have their own strategy in that, they have a number of pieces of business. YouTube TV is a small piece of it. But from a strategy standpoint, be the number one streaming big money for the NFL Sunday Ticket. That's why I became a user of YouTube TV because I love my Sunday football. So they wanted to play hardball as well and wanted to show Disney that, hey, you can't be a bully, especially to somebody that's bigger with a lot deeper pockets than you. And basically said, no, you know what? We're not playing your game. In fact, we're not playing your game, and we'll even give our subscribers $20 back, which they did while we fight this out, while we talk this out. Now, I understand the strategy. The culture is kind of interesting in that they were both not going to give. But the brand, I ask, what did it do to both brands? And basically, and I've read like maybe a dozen articles on this. It really hurt both brands. It hurt maybe YouTube TV a little bit more in the short term, in that a lot of consumers were without their channels, many of which moved to other providers. They went to Fubo, they went to Dish, they went to DirecTV. I think there's Sling. There's a couple other providers out there where you can get ESPN and some other basic channels. I didn't leave. I wanted my NFL Sunday Ticket, but I know a good number, I think it's about 20% of their subscribers actually closed down their YouTube TV account and went to other providers so they could get their channels. So that certainly maybe didn't hurt them a ton financially, but did hurt them a little bit from a branding standpoint. And that had to be disconcerting to them because you can't have a bunch of negativity out there and become the number one streaming brand, the number one provider of streaming TV. And what I also think is Disney showed a little bit of their sharp teeth in the consumer area, in the branding area, in that they, were trying to hardball a big player in Google, and it didn't work out all that well the first couple of weeks. So, as I figured it would, despite some of the puffy chests and the blowhard comments in the news for 2 weeks, I knew that eventually they were going to come to terms because the long term strategy for both was going to be damaged, including the brand here in the short term if they didn't get a deal done. And it would hurt Disney because there'd be a number of people that wouldn't have their channels that stayed with YouTube TV, not to mention the black and white fact that they were losing millions per day by not having their channels on YouTube TV. And while Google may not have been hurt that much financially, from an image standpoint, if you want to be the number one provider in streaming TV, it's kind of hard to do that without ESPN channels in the long term. So they came to a deal. So, as fascinated as I am from a business standpoint of this fight, obviously from a consumer standpoint, I was ticked and disappointed. And looking at it as a consumer, I think that you look at Disney and YouTube TV and you say, yeah, you guys made out okay. But you know what? I got screwed out of my channels for 2 weeks. And even though financially you probably came to a deal, I feel like I'm going to pay for it one way, shape, or form in the near term. So there's some brand value that needs to be recreated there, I think, both for Disney and for YouTube TV. What can we learn from that? it's kind of like I think of when I do event planning and I roll out a conference, is that, when things are happening in the back that are going wrong, maybe a speaker didn't show up right on time, or maybe a screen isn't working properly, or the food hasn't come out the way I wanted to. If that can be covered up, if I could catch the food before it goes out there and make a change, if something isn't working, but I have an alternative, maybe a backup projector or something like that. Maybe if speaker doesn't show up, but I've got a different session, maybe it is some kind of collaborative type of networking that I have in my back pocket and say, hey, you know what? Our speaker is running late, but we're going to move this session to this time slot, or we're going to do this particular exercise. Yeah, then it kind of goes seamlessly. Maybe the audience sees a little bit of the crack, but they don't see the massive hole that's happening. They don't see the bigger problem behind it. And I think that's what we need to do as brand managers of our business. Things are going to go wrong, things are going to get screwed up, things are not going to work the way that we want them to. Sometimes we are going to have problems with partners. I actually just went through a little bit of that with the National Police Podcast Network that I'm creating with one of my clients, National Police Federal Credit Union. We had a little problem in the team, made the change, backed us up a little bit, but it was nothing that didn't keep us rolling in the eyes of the people we wanted to work with. So the more you could keep the problem behind the curtain, which YouTube and Disney did not do in this case, the better off you're going to be. Because you could always, after you fix it, if it wasn't so obvious to your customer, member, client, audience, the more that you can hide it and then later on say, hey, you know what? We had this problem. And hey, we came out on the other side. You didn't see any interruption in your experience, or maybe just a slight one, which could have been a lot bigger. That's something that we can use. Maybe entities as large as Google and Disney don't care. But I know if you're a small business, a mom and pop restaurant, a coffee shop, a credit union, a small retail business, those little cracks can become very, very huge and have a ripple effect in your bottom line. So do what you can to keep those cracks in your strategy and in your culture behind the curtain, so they don't hurt your brand at all, or maybe just a little bit, but you can recover from that. So thanks for being with me here in season 11. Look forward to coming back in the first quarter of 2026. And in the meantime, have a great holiday season. And I hope you're branding the experience at a very high level for your employees, for your customers, and for everybody you serve.
This has been Branding the Experience. Learn more about Bator Training and Consulting and Break Ice Marketing at www.btcinc.net/marketing.